I originally created my YouTube channel in March of 2014. At the time, there was a little game called Watch Dogs that was about to release, and the hype was insane. I remember so many people believed that this game could be a GTA killer. And to be fair, Ubisoft didn't do themselves any favors by making graphics like this. Basically saying, hey, play GTA for 2 months, but then it's time to play our game. It's also funny because shortly after this, Watch Dogs was delayed, so this ad was useless. But regardless, May finally rolled around, and I remember asking Ubisoft for a review copy. At the time, I think I had 10,000 subscribers or close to it, so they didn't bother replying, which is totally fine. But I was determined to get this game because I knew other large channels would get early access and have content ready on release, and therefore I would be at a disadvantage. So I went to eBay, and to my surprise, I actually found a copy of Watch Dogs being sold before release. At this point, I'm still in high school, I'm working a part-time job, and my YouTube channel is doing pretty well, but they wanted $140, which I never spent on a video game because I was like 16. Eventually though, I said F it, it's a risk I'm gonna take, and thankfully the listing was real and I got the game on May 24th, 3 days before it officially released. I even came across the original tweet I posted when it arrived, which honestly just takes me back. I remember making videos on this busted HP laptop and I had to hold a microphone in my hands, but there was really nothing quite like it, and part of me misses that grind and just passion for content creation. But yeah, down $140 now with Watch Dogs in my hand, it was time to create content, and I did just that. I made 23 videos on Watch Dogs alone from May 24th to May 31st. That's more than 3 videos a day on average for an entire week. Looking back though, I didn't really process what I was playing, if that makes sense. That entire week, I was hitting record every single time I launched the game, so I was more focused on content instead of actually experiencing the game for what it was. Obviously, I started to see a lot of hate and criticism, many people bringing up the original E3 demo and just how bad the game was downgraded, which is totally fair. It definitely was, and Ubisoft just straight up finessed everyone. And I remember after all that, about a month later, the community and game just felt dead. Everyone had mostly moved on. A lot of people went back to GTA, funnily enough, and even I was like, I need to branch out and start covering other games. It honestly wasn't until a few months later that I realized I never actually got to play the game for what it was. I was just so swept into the content side of things that despite doing a walkthrough, it felt like I never even touched this game. So I went back and played it, this time with no content in mind, and I loved Watch Dogs. I've said this a million times, that first Watch Dogs game is not perfect, but for a brand new IP, Ubisoft really did create something special. The city, the NPCs, and the gameplay are really good, but it was overshadowed by this unrealistic hype, which again, Ubisoft did help create. And because of all that backlash, Ubisoft did a complete 180 for the sequel. Watch Dogs 2. Announced 2 years after the first game, we got our first look at the sequel. No longer will we be playing as Aiden Pierce, but instead a brand new character named Marcus Holloway, and the game would now be set in San Francisco. Fan reception was pretty positive, with the reveal on YouTube getting 25,000 likes and only 3,700 dislikes. Reading through the comments, people were looking forward to this game, pointing out how vibrant the world and characters seemed. And I really have to give Ubisoft props here. This was an 18-minute showcase with actual gameplay, talking about online, giving us story tidbits, and showing us things that they learned from the first game. Most game reveals today just have a CGI trailer, give us basically little to no information, and then the game just ends up getting delayed. Now, one could argue Ubisoft kind of had to do this because of all the controversy from the first game, but still, this was really cool to see. And even the following months after, Ubisoft were killing it with the marketing and different trailers that they released. Honestly, at least to me, the hype was real. Watch Dogs 2 would release on November 15th, 2016 to positive critic reception, getting an 82 on Metacritic, which is still the highest rated game in the franchise. Even though critics and most fans were enjoying the game, sales did not reflect that at launch. It was being reported that, at least in the UK, sales were down tremendously. Ubisoft would eventually respond to these claims, stating that it was true, but they believed in the long-term success of this game. Watch Dogs 2 would end up getting a bunch of updates, some new DLC, and end up selling over 10 million copies. So shout out to Ubisoft for having faith in their projects and not giving up. But sales aside, critics aside, what did I think of this game? Unfortunately, I was disappointed. I just could not get invested into this story. I didn't find Marcus all that compelling. Some DedSec members drove me crazy, and the villains, to put it frankly, were trash. Playing through the game for the first time, I just did not like the tone or the writing. The gameplay itself was fun, but I started to miss that feeling of the first game. A lot of my friends shared the same opinion, and ultimately, I was just disappointed. Just like with the first game, it wasn't until I replayed it more and more that I actually started to like this different direction, and much like Ubisoft, I did a complete 180 and really enjoyed what this game has to offer, and I feel like it deserves a proper video, even if I'm like 7 years too late. Watch Dogs 2 is beautiful. The recreation of San Francisco is not only spot on, but the atmosphere and the attention to detail goes above and beyond. In the open worlds, you'll see NPCs that feel like their own characters. They'll fight on their own accord or even vandalize cars and property. I was taking selfies and people would react in fun and unique ways. Even when you're not interacting with them directly, they still feel alive. This clip, for example, I'm just walking in the park and there's people playing musical instruments, a group of friends hanging out, and even just dogs running about. This is obviously what we're used to seeing in the real world, so it might not seem like a big deal, but this is a video game from 2016, something that new AAA titles still can't accomplish, or even the sequel, Watch Dogs Legion, which I'll save that for another video because I don't want to really get into that right now. But the city is just one of the many highlights. I'd argue the biggest strength of Watch Dogs 2 is the gameplay. This is a proper sequel where the developers took almost everything from the first game that was good and made it better. A perfect example is hacking. In this game, they added a bunch of new features like calling the cops or gangs on anyone in the city, controlling the different direction that cars can drive in, hacking cranes, hacking forklifts with the ability to now control them remotely. There's an RC jumper, there's a drone, NetHack, which allows you to see through walls and hack cameras that way. And then there's returning hacks like blowing up steam pipes, but this time you can have a radius around it so it will explode when an enemy drives over it. I mean, I guess you could argue this removes some level of skill, but the first game has focus mode, which is arguably even more OP. Parkour is another great example. Marcus can climb a lot more objects, and there's a ton of great animations. And there's just so many more features, like the ability to listen to music on foot. And I feel like that doesn't get enough credit, but listening to music in the open world or during missions is a nice touch, and more games should do it. I even mentioned this earlier, but being able to use your phone to take pictures and selfies, finally having multiple hacker spaces that are unique and not just shipping containers. And a really big improvement is customization. There are hundreds upon hundreds of different clothing options, and you can really make Marcus your own. Watch Dogs 1 has some cool coats, but there's only about 20 to choose from, and that's it. You can't customize your hat, your shoes, pants, or anything like that, like you can in Watch Dogs 2. And speaking of customization, there's also custom paint jobs for vehicles and weapons. Not a groundbreaking feature, but still, this was added. Driving physics. I see a lot of people like Watch Dogs 1, but it definitely feels cartoony and just there's some wacky physics going on. And in this game, it's still kind of there, but cars feel a bit more grounded and just handle a bit better. I personally like the driving in the second a lot more than the first, but that is kind of subjective. Obviously, we can't forget the Shuffler outfit. Solving that mystery was so much fun, and to this day, it's still the most viewed video on my channel. And again, to some, this may not seem like that big of a deal, but it starts to add up and really bring life into this game. Something Watch Dogs Legion, which I said I wasn't going to mention again, but I did. Watch Dogs Legion failed at completely, along with a lot of Ubisoft games that came after. But with that said, and I want to be clear, Watch Dogs 2 is not perfect either. I still think this story suffers from some really bad writing at times. The jokes, even when the game released, felt dated and really bad, so you can only imagine it now. And since this cast is so big, so many characters don't get enough screen time. Horatio is the perfect example. His death feels rushed and not earned at all, and it sucks because his character has potential. Josh is literally the best hacker in the group, and he's sidelined, and you forget he exists. Honestly, the biggest problem with the story is the villains. Dushan does not feel like a threat. Bro is doing yoga and meditating, never getting his hands dirty. Everything around him is constantly falling apart, so he hires Lenny to do his dirty work. And Lenny is just as bad and has this weird relationship with Josh, and it's so bad. I hate her. Honestly, one of the worst characters ever. So I can't ignore some of this story. It's sad because there are really good moments, and that part about how technology is being abused by these corporations is so good. There are just way too many characters in this game, and they really should have just toned it back a bit. The villains have always been an issue in Watch Dogs, which is strange because Far Cry is the exact opposite, but it is what it is. This game, when it comes to the story, has really high moments and some really, really low moments. But Watch Dogs 2, and I was part of this, just doesn't get enough love. And if you haven't replayed it in a few years, I definitely recommend just giving it another chance, and you might end up liking it. Anyways, if you made it this far into the video, I really do appreciate it. I know I've been missing for 2 years, so hopefully this video wasn't too bad. I might be a little bit rusty with my commentary, my editing. I'll get better though. I want to make a video on Watch Dogs Legion. I want to make a video on the first Watch Dogs, and yeah, just kind of start making content again because I miss it. Thank you guys, seriously, if you made it this far. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you guys later.
What the fuck? Oh, shit.